Welcome to ILTV's Weekly Insider. I'm Steve Leibowitz. There was a 3-week period before the Six-Day War in 1967 when Israel seemed vulnerable to attack from 3 Arab nations, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Israel was fully mobilized and used the time to plan its attack. The result is known. Fighting on 3 fronts, Israel defeated all 3 enemies, capturing the Golan from Syria, Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Sinai and Gaza from Egypt. I was only 16 at the time, a secular Jew living in Queens who knew nothing about Israel, except what I learned about the country in that 3-week period. And then, of course, the euphoria that followed. It shaped my identity and made me decide to move to this country as soon as I was old enough to do so. There's been a lot of talk about our leaders' need to take responsibility. I'd like to say that I take responsibility for moving here and convincing myself that doing so would help secure a Jewish home for me and my children and my grandchildren. I now look at my 5 kids and 9 grandkids and wonder if I failed them. Well, joining us in this waiting period via Zoom from Jerusalem is author and columnist Amos Asael, and with me here in the studio is Alon Tal, a former Knesset member from the National Unity Party. Alon, do you take responsibility, and what are you telling your kids today?
Well, the first thing, I take responsibility for making a mistake. In other words, in retrospect, it doesn't seem logical that I was as optimistic, if you want, or perhaps I was just a little bit apathetic about the fact that a monster was being raised up on the other side of the border, and had 2 assumptions. One, that with time, this Hamas government would become more practical and would worry about their people, or that economic incentives could somehow sway them. This is the most extreme Islamic regime, and unfortunately, I was quite naive about their ability to change and evolve into some sort of a government that we could negotiate with. That's
days
past.
Are over.
Yeah, that went away with those dead bodies on that past Saturday.
Amos, there were so many misconceptions, so many conceptions exploded on October 7th. From 2005, during disengagement and beyond, our leaders were telling us that leaving Gaza would ultimately make us more secure. After the Hamas takeover and until October 7th, there was a policy of allowing Hamas to be paid off in return for quiet, mixed with occasional flare-ups and IDF operations. Which perceptions have changed for you after October 7th?
Well, I too believe that Hamas could be contained rather than eradicated. And I think that the critical mass of Israeli society, certainly a critical mass of Israeli decision makers, who also harbored this mistake and now concede it, whether explicitly or implicitly. I would note that I'm not sure it's the departure from Gaza that is the cause of what has happened here. It's a toleration of what happened inside Gaza, and I'm not sure that our civilian presence over there, had it been left intact, would have mattered much in this regard, but that's really water under the bridge. The question is, what exactly have we just witnessed, and what should we do? In terms of what we've witnessed, I think that clearly Israel was caught off guard, and it was caught off guard because of two obvious mistakes. One was technical. The over-reliance on technology as the barrier between us and the Gaza Strip made us vulnerable to that barrier's disruption, as it was skillfully done by Hamas in its attack. That's what happened on the technical side. On the mental side, I would say that nobody here, whether within the military or the rest of the security branches or in Israeli society itself, nobody expected this kind of attack. And in this regard, what Hamas did is indeed a landmark in military history. Never before was there such massive deployment of terrorists. Terrorists had been, until now, deployed in small groups against very specific targets. Even if they were as big as a skyscraper, as they were in 9/11, they were very narrow and specific. Now you had for the first time in military history, a mass deployment of thousands of terrorists along a front about 40 kilometers wide, and storming deliberately and systematically the population. This is what we faced, and the question now is not how we got there, but what we should do in the face of it.
All right, Alon, let me turn to you again. You came on Aliyah. You became one of the leading environmental authorities in this country. But then came October 7th, and when we look forward to what our country will be in the future, are we going to fundamentally have to change as a society to rebuild and make sure that we're safer next time?
Well, yes, I think that we're going to have to be far more vigilant. I agree that it wasn't the Israeli leaving Gaza which was the problem. It was when we said the promise, the first rocket that comes over, we will come in there and hammer them.
I remember Yossi Sarid saying it.
And we all believed it, and it didn't happen. And everybody found the excuses and the rationalization. So I think in that sense, the future of the Gaza Strip, I believe, is not under Israeli control, but it is certainly demilitarized, and hopefully with a multilateral force. I want to say one more thing. Israel has to invade Gaza. I was looking in preparation for the discussion for the correct English translation for l'achriya, to defeat or to drive these people out. But the truth of the matter is,
secure victory.
It has to be an unconditional victory, and not just for the Israelis, because the Palestinian people, if they have any national aspirations at all, they have to realize that it's not going to be under radical Islamists. The only way forward is the path of moderation and compromise. The Middle East has changed, and there's enough moderate countries to signal the Palestinians, listen, we're going to have to do what we have to do. And the outcome is clear. 360,000 reserves, well-trained soldiers, the Israeli army versus 20,000 ragtag terrorists. We will win this war. The only question is, can we do it with minimal casualties? But
to our soldiers.
To our soldiers. But I have no moral problems with regard to the Palestinians. I grieve the loss of life and collateral damage we'll see, but the fact of the matter is those people's lives would be far worse to leave them under the despotic, violent, horrible regime. And we saw what they did in 2007 when they took over, and how little they have tolerance for their own people and their own willingness and cynicism in shooting rockets, which, how many? It's not just the one in the hospital. There have been 650 rockets that killed civilians there.
That have fallen on their own side of the border.
And yet they don't seem to care. So this kind of an evil regime has to be removed, and it's incumbent in Israel because we're the only ones who can.
Well, Amos, you certainly expect and want Israel to score a military victory and destroy Hamas rule in Gaza, I assume. But have you given much thought yet to what comes next? What are the options?
I think Alon is right. What should ideally follow whatever transpires militarily is a post-Hamas regime that will obviously be not Israeli, but Arab in some configuration. And I think that it shouldn't be up to us to engineer it, even if we have some very wise political engineers, which I'm afraid we do not have, but even if we had them, it still would be disadvantageous for this kind of task to be conceived by non-Arabs. It should be an Arab structure, perhaps one conceived somewhere between Egypt and Saudi Arabia and implemented one way or another through some kind of an inter-Arab configuration.
You didn't mention the Palestinian Authority. Amos, you don't mention the Palestinian Authority at all in that configuration.
Oh, I actually do include them in this, absolutely, yes. But I'm afraid that, in fact, I've been asked, I would have recommended that they take over. Moreover, I happen to have been in the study of Amos Oz, the great novelist Amos Oz's house in Arad, almost the day that Ariel Sharon announced his intention to retreat from Gaza, and I asked him for his response. And Amos Oz, who was a doyen of the Israeli left, said that what troubles him about the idea is its unilateralism, and he said, let's hand it over formally to the Palestinian Authority, make it orderly, make sure that someone steps into the vacuum that can manage the place. That was his idea, and I think it was wise, and I would certainly recommend that again now, except that the Palestinian Authority, as it is currently being led, is extremely weak. And I think that for this to work, they have to be enhanced by some more Arab factors in the region.
Alon, nobody knows exactly how this war is going to end, but we already do know that there have been a number of Jewish communities along the border that have been decimated. I'm talking about on the south right now. Entire kibbutzim that were just wiped out. Horrible, horrible tragedies. How many years, what kind of effort, what kind of massive undertaking is this going to be to rebuild those communities so that people can feel safe enough to go back, rebuild their homes, or will they?
So I think the physical rebuilding is the easy part. In other words, we're talking about dozens of buildings that have been burnt, and I'm certain that we can restore those in a year or two, certainly if we make it a priority. The question is, of course, is the psychological one. And these communities all say, with one single voice, we will not go back if we have to return to the previous reality. And the truth of the matter is, it's not like they haven't been crying out about their situation for years and their sense of insecurity. And we were all complacent, all the governments of Israel. In that sense, I think...
I was hearing the description by the woman that was released overnight.
Mrs. Lipschitz.
And she was saying how all the people in the OTEF, next to the Gaza border, felt that something was happening just the week before.
They sent letters out, and the night of the attack, the generals were talking to each other. There will be a time, and there will be a reckoning for the massive malfeasance and recklessness and negligence of the government. But I don't know if that's what the smartest thing to talk about now as we look towards a military resolution of this issue. But yeah, I think that we're going to have to show the people of the south, not just in the Gaza envelope, but all the cities around there, Netivot and Sderot, all these development towns which have been so vulnerable to Palestinian terrorism, that the reality has changed and Israel takes their real despair seriously. Until we do that, we will not have a southern part of Israel. So that's another reason why we have to go in if we want to really reinstate our sovereignty over the the western Negev of Israel.
I could see Alon Tal being part of a movement some years down the road to help resettle the south.
Benny Gantz has already gone on record saying he will move to the OTEF when this is over.
Amos, there's a phenomenon being reported about some 2,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews volunteering for military service. Now, that's something that, it's been a big issue with the community and whether or not they should serve in service in general. Might the horrors of October 7th have pushed the message into the ultra-Orthodox community that in addition to Torah study, there's a need to actually defend Israel, or will this be a passing phase?
I don't know. I have long been under the impression, and also discussing it publicly, that the ultra-Orthodox public is in a glacial movement away from its rabbinical leaders. And this might be part of it, and that the ultra-Orthodox Israeli population is becoming Israeli to an extent that its leaders and ideologues never anticipated. Let me mention parenthetically that when the Zionist movement began reviving the Hebrew language, most ultra-Orthodox rabbis were against the usage of Hebrew as a vernacular language. And today, the paradoxical situation is that not only is Hebrew the language of ultra-Orthodox Israelis, it is their only language because they don't study English or any other foreign language. So they're becoming Zionists despite their ideologues. And I think what we're witnessing now is the national reflex that is overpowering the ultra-Orthodox ideology.
I think, by the way, that national reflex, maybe we'll talk about it in a future show, might also be impacting some of the Arab Israelis, especially the Bedouin. Alon, your party leader, Benny Gantz, has joined this emergency government from nearly day one, as soon as he was able to. Have you been satisfied with the performance of the government in these last days, in these 18 days of warfare?
Well, let's start with the fact that it's a very good thing that the military cabinet, the five, there's no leaks from that group. In other words, that's already a good start. Benny Gantz is a professional soldier. He's a smart person with inordinate experience, and he brings with him Gadi Eisenkopf, a previous chief of staff and a former general in charge of the northern area. That kind of expertise is so critical for the country because we have lost so much faith in the military's ability to lead. Not the military's, but the government. I think with the tremendous failure of October 7th, we needed that influx of wisdom and experience. And so I'm very glad he made that decision. He made it, incidentally, without any regard to polls or cost-benefit analysis politically. He just realized now, for the second time, that there are emergencies in the national reality and history that require somebody to step up, and he stepped up. So I'm happy with that.
I know that the faction has not been meeting now. I'm sure Benny Gantz is way too busy for that. I know that you have been pitching in and really attending shivas all over the country of mourning families and so on. Do you know what was Benny Gantz's reaction emotionally to what took place? Do you have a clue, a sense of what he was feeling in the gut? I know a lot of us have real gut feelings now. What have you heard about Benny?
Well, the people who were with him in those first couple of days describe enormous shock at the magnitude. They gave us the extent of the casualties very slowly. It started with 100 as it crept up to 1,400. But Gantz was given the military's assessment that it was over 1,000 and over 200 hostages. And he immediately realized that this is unlike any other event in Israeli history. So yeah, I think he took it very, very hard. And I'll tell you another thing. I was very impressed with Gantz. There was recently a funeral of Ophir Lipstein, who was the mayor, the chief, or the chair of the regional council of the Negev, Shar Negev region. And Benny was one of the eulogizers. They were friends. And he opened, and it was an audience filled with people who live in those communities, by apologizing. It was so refreshing. And he said, I want to say I'm sorry. We did not protect you, Ophir, and I want to say sorry to your family. We should have been there for him. That kind of humility is so desperately needed now. We saw with the kind of Israeli visceral response to President Biden's visit. When somebody actually talks and shows empathy, Israelis feel that there's something there. And I think that I'm not sure what's happening politically, because this is not a time to talk politics, but I'm very proud to be a part of a political party that says, look, this is a national emergency. We have to be there to help.
Amos, Prime Minister Netanyahu has compared Hamas to the Nazis, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda who carried out 9/11. Where do you place them in the list of evil ideologies? And if so, why allow humanitarian assistance? None was allowed in Dresden nor in Mosul.
Well, in terms of categorizing them, I share, this is the Israeli consensus now. They have pressed the Jewish button that reminds, I say, every one of the world's 15 million Jews, what we have seen and heard about, reminded each of us of the scenes of the Einsatzgruppen who mowed down thousands of Jews with submachine guns and machine guns, and it reminded Jews of the infamous massacres in Ukraine in 1648 and 49, and of the massacres of the Crusades. This is where the events of October 7th fall in the Jewish psyche, and I believe that this is also where they will go down in Jewish historiography. There is no belittling the severity and the audacity of what they did. I would say in this regard that what they did not understand is what the Jewish reflex at play is and what they were triggering, because the Jewish people in its entirety now feels provoked and will respond, is responding. This is an entirely different situation from what has ever previously happened since Israel's establishment between Israel and the Arabs. And I therefore say to them, this is hardly the beginning. And if they assumed that what this will cause is a few weeks of violence, the way it is things have transpired between us and Gaza over the over the past quarter of a century, they don't understand what button they just pressed. In terms of humanitarian aid that you're asking about, we're not in the international position or the geopolitical position in which the British were when they orchestrated the bombings of Dresden. We are not in a diplomatic position to do anything we please. And I think this is what we're seeing down there. This was not Israel's intention. In my reading of what has happened here in recent days, it wasn't Israel's intention to allow this to come in. This is an Israeli response to Western pressure. Maybe it is being done in a way that we can tolerate, but I don't think it's our design.
Thanks, Amos. I just want to ask Alon one more thing. We're almost out of time now. All of us want those 200 hostages, men, women, and children, returned more than anything. But let me ask you this. If you were given a choice to take every one of the Hamas prisoners out, hand them over in exchange for those 200 today, would we do it? Would Israel do it? Has Israel made that offer, do you think?
From the start, my intuition said, let's get all the hostages out, send whoever wants to go back to Gaza, and then go in and lay down the Hamas.
Let them fight.
But that has not been forthcoming. I'm sure those options are being weighed in terms of the feasibility.
Morally, you would agree to do it?
I think so.
Empty the jails.
I think so. I'd empty the jails. I'd cut the best deal I could as quickly as I can and get 220 hostages is not a trivial number for a country that values human life. But in no way would I compromise Israel's ability to subsequently go in and impose its will on the Hamas leadership. And I want to agree with one thing that Amos said, and it connects to what he said about the ultra-Orthodox willingness to all of a sudden be part of the army. I think they connect to those historical images and memories very much. And that is maybe what's moving them more in understanding the Zionist solution is necessary, even in this modern day.
Alon, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. I sure hope we'll be talking about better news in the near future. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you for being with us today. Amos Asael, thanks for joining us by Zoom from Jerusalem. And thank you, Steve. And thank you to Alon Tal, who was here in the studio with us. I'm Steve Liebowitz. This was ILTV's Insider. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching. Be safe and shalom from Israel.